Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Path to Freedom, the podcast where we explore timeless Buddhist teachings and their profound relevance to our lives today. I'm Anna.
And I'm David. Today, we're diving into an incredibly foundational story from the Buddhist tradition, the very first tale in the vast Jataka collection.
That's right, David. We're talking about the Apaṇṇaka Jataka, which translates to the story of assured truth or the unquestionable teaching. Its placement as Jataka number 1 isn't just incidental, it underscores its foundational importance, setting a significant precedent for the entire collection.
It immediately highlights crucial themes: wisdom versus folly, the paramount importance of discernment, especially in evaluating advice and selecting one's spiritual refuge, and the inherent perils in superficial judgments and avarice. The tale vividly demonstrates how sound judgment paves the way to security and well-being, whereas credulity and flawed reasoning invariably lead to calamity. This story's primary position strongly suggests an emphasis on the Buddhist concept of samadhi, or right view, as the essential starting point on the path to enlightenment.
Absolutely. The Jataka collection itself functions as a significant pedagogical instrument, and this inaugural story often aims to establish a central theme or guiding principle for what follows. It contrasts a wise merchant, the bodhisattva, with a foolish counterpart, highlighting how discernment is a pivotal element of right view.
Before we delve into the ancient past, let's first set the stage with the story of the present, the circumstances that prompted the Buddha to share this profound tale.
Our story begins with Apaṇṇaka, a truly prominent and exceptionally generous lay disciple of the Buddha. He was renowned for his unwavering faith and his substantial support of the monastic community, the Sangha, having even famously donated the Jetavana monastery near Savatthi to the Buddha.
On this particular occasion, Apaṇṇaka arrived at Jetavana, accompanied by a considerable group of 500 friends. Now, these individuals had a unique background. They had previously been adherents of what the texts term heretical teachers, meaning they followed spiritual paths and doctrines outside of the Buddha's direct teachings.
Interestingly, these 500 friends had initially been profoundly moved and convinced by the Buddha's discourses. As a result, they had formally taken refuge in the Triple Gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, his teachings, and the Sangha, and had even begun to earnestly engage in meritorious deeds, including offering alms, diligently observing ethical precepts, known as sila, and regularly listening to the Dharma to deepen their understanding.
But here's where the challenge arose. Some 7 or 8 months later, after the Buddha had been away and then returned to Jetavana, Apaṇṇaka brought these same 500 friends back into the Buddha's presence. He explained, with some concern, that in the interim, his friends had unfortunately lapsed in their faith and reverted to their former non-Buddhist beliefs and practices.
The Buddha, with his characteristic compassion and insight, directly questioned the men about this reported change of heart, and they confessed they had indeed forsaken their refuge in the Triple Gem. In response, the Buddha delivered a powerful and illuminating discourse on the singular and unparalleled nature of the Triple Gem as the only true, secure, and ultimate refuge.
He emphasized its unique capacity to guide beings towards liberation from the cycle of suffering and to the attainment of supreme enlightenment. The Buddha articulated the preeminence of a Buddha with striking clarity, stating, "Nowhere between the lowest of hells below and the highest heaven above, nowhere in all the infinite worlds that stretch right and left, is there the equal, much less the superior, of a Buddha."
He then admonished them, connecting their present spiritual instability to a larger pattern, saying, "In forsaking such a refuge as this, you have certainly erred. In the past, too, men who foolishly mistook what was no refuge for a real refuge met disaster." This statement directly forged a link between their immediate dilemma and the central theme of the ancient story he was about to recount.
This reversion of Apaṇṇaka's friends, this spiritual backsliding, as it's sometimes called, mirrors a common human experience. Their initial conviction, it might be inferred, could have been more reliant on the charismatic presence and authority of the Buddha, rather than on a deeply internalized understanding. The Buddha's response, using a Jataka tale, was a compassionate teaching tool, illustrating the long-term consequences of their choices and appealing to their capacity for reason.
To further illuminate his point, the Buddha explained that this pattern of misjudgment was not new. In former existences as well, individuals who had mistakenly placed their trust in false refuges instead of true ones had invariably encountered disaster. Conversely, Those who had steadfastly adhered to truth and wisdom had consistently prospered and found safety.
Deeply moved by the Buddha's words and earnestly wishing for his friends to grasp this crucial lesson, Apaṇṇaka made a formal request. He implored the Buddha to narrate the specific story from the past that exemplified this principle, phrasing his plea with poetic reverence. But the bygone destruction of those opinionated ones in the demon-haunted wilderness and the prospering of the men who clave to the truth are hidden from us and known only to you. May it please the Blessed One, as though causing the full moon to rise in the sky, to make this thing clear to us.
This earnest entreaty served as the narrative catalyst, bridging the immediate problem of wavering faith among his contemporaries with its illustrative precedent from a past life. The Buddha's choice to use a Jataka tale here demonstrates the practical, adaptable, and living nature of the Dharma, not as abstract philosophy, but as wisdom skillfully applied to real-life situations.
And now, with that setup, let's journey back in time to the ancient chronicle itself. The Buddha then transported his listeners to a distant past, unfolding the Atitavatu, the story of events long transpired. The setting for this ancient chronicle was the renowned city of Benares, a conventional backdrop for many Jataka tales.
In that era, the Bodhisattva, the being who would eventually become Gautama Buddha, had taken birth into a merchant's family. As he matured, he distinguished himself as an exceptionally wise, astute, resourceful, and experienced trader, successfully leading a substantial caravan comprising 500 carts.
Contemporaneously, in the same vibrant city, there resided another young merchant. He too commanded a caravan of 500 carts, but in stark contrast to the Bodhisattva, he was characterized as inherently foolish, silly, lacking in basic common sense, and notably unresourceful in his dealings. This pronounced dichotomy in their fundamental character was established from the very outset, foreshadowing the central conflict that would unfold.
As fate would have it, both merchants made preparations to embark on trading expeditions simultaneously, each with their 500 carts, thus potentially forming a massive combined caravan of 1,000 carts, heading in the same direction.
The Bodhisattva, with his characteristic foresight and practical wisdom, immediately recognized the significant logistical challenges of such a large train. He reasoned that the road would be excessively burdened, and critically, essential resources like wood, water, and fodder would become exceedingly scarce for such a multitude. Understanding these impending difficulties, he approached the other merchant and proposed that one caravan should proceed first, while the other followed at a later time.
The foolish merchant, when presented with the choice, quickly opted to lead the way. His decision was based on a series of perceived, immediate advantages. He believed he'd travel on an unrutted road. His oxen would graze on freshest grass, his men would gather choicest herbs, and he'd find clean water. Crucially, he believed he'd be able to set his own prices at their destination, avoiding strenuous haggling, and he also felt his people would admire his leadership.
The Bodhisattva, the wise merchant, carefully considered the situation and discerned a very different set of advantages in choosing to travel second. He reasoned that the first caravan would inevitably level the road and clear obstacles, saving his own caravan considerable labor. While the first group's oxen would consume the older grass, this would allow tender new shoots to spring up, providing superior fodder for his own animals.
Similarly, his men would find fresh growth of herbs. And regarding water, if sources were scarce, his caravan could utilize any wells the first party might have dug. Significantly, he anticipated he would be able to barter his goods at prices already established by the first merchant, thereby avoiding the arduous and often frustrating process of haggling, which he described as, quote, killing work.
This critical decision-making juncture reveals the fundamental differences between the two men. The foolish merchant's reasoning was driven by a desire for immediate, superficial comforts and gains, lacking any deeper foresight. The wise merchant, in contrast, demonstrated profound foresight, considering secondary effects, long-term benefits, and a more strategic approach. He thus readily agreed to the foolish merchant's desire to go first.
Brimmed with confidence, the foolish merchant promptly set out. After some travel, his caravan arrived at the formidable outskirts of a vast and perilous wilderness known as the Waterless Desert, stretching for a daunting 60 yojanas. Local knowledge held that this wilderness was haunted by malevolent supernatural beings known as yakas, or goblins, identified as both a drought wilderness and a demon wilderness. Despite these warnings, the foolish merchant did take the initial precaution of having his men fill numerous large jars with water.
Deep within the heart of this desert, the chief Yaka who held dominion over the area, perceiving the caravan's approach, decided to employ his magical powers to ensnare them. He conjured a grand illusion. He manifested himself as a distinguished, noble-looking individual, a mighty lord, seated in an opulent carriage drawn by magnificent white bulls. He was accompanied by about a dozen other Yakas, all disguised as human attendants. The most striking and deceptive aspect? They all seemed to be thoroughly wet and covered in mud, their hair and clothes dripping, adorned with fresh lotuses and water lilies, as if they had just journeyed through a region blessed with recent, heavy rainfall and abundant water sources. Even their carriage wheels were caked with fresh mud.
The foolish merchant, riding at the head of his caravan, soon encountered this illusory entourage. The disguised Yaka chief, adopting a know-it-all attitude, greeted the merchant with feigned kindness. He then deceitfully informed the merchant that just a short distance ahead lay an area with plentiful water, where it rained constantly, and numerous lakes were filled with lotuses. He strongly advised the merchant to discard his heavy loads of water, arguing it was no longer necessary and would allow faster travel.
Despite having been explicitly warned by local people about the presence of demons in this wilderness, the foolish merchant was utterly taken in by the convincing appearance of the Yakas and their persuasive advice. He failed to discern any sign of their true demonic nature, being confident that they were helpful people. Without a moment's hesitation or critical thought, he ordered his men to break all their water jars and empty every last drop of their precious supply, without saving even a single cupful.
The caravan then pressed onward, expecting to soon reach the promised oasis. But they found no such relief. The verdant area described by the Yaka was merely an illusion, a mirage that faded as they approached. As the day wore on, the men and their oxen grew increasingly exhausted and desperate from thirst. Some men, realizing they'd been duped, began to grumble and accuse the merchant for his gullibility. By sunset, the situation was dire. The oxen were too weak, the men equally parched, unable to cook, and sank to the ground in despair.
As soon as darkness enveloped the desert, the Yakas, shedding their disguises, emerged from their demonic city. They fell upon the helpless and enfeebled caravan, mercilessly slaughtering and devouring every single man and beast. When their gruesome feast was over, they departed, leaving behind only a scattering of bare bones amidst the 500 carts, which still contained their valuable, untouched merchandise. Thus, the foolish merchant, through his lack of discernment and susceptibility to deception, became the sole cause of the utter annihilation of his entire caravan.
That's chillin', David. Now let's turn to the fate of the wise merchant, the Bodhisattva.
The Bodhisattva allowed a significant interval to pass after the foolish merchant's departure. Sources suggest about 6 weeks or a month and a half. When the time came, he set out with his own caravan of 500 carts.
Upon reaching the treacherous edge of the same waterless desert, the Bodhisattva immediately took prudent measures. He instructed his men to fill all their water jars to the very brim, ensuring a maximum supply. He then assembled his entire company and issued clear, unequivocal instructions, born of his foresight. This is called the waterless desert, and I have heard that it is haunted by demons and ghosts. Therefore we should be careful.
He strictly forbade the use of even a single handful or drop of water without his explicit personal permission. He also warned them against consuming any unfamiliar leaf, flower, or fruit they might encounter without first showing it to him for inspection, due to the significant risk of poisonous plants. With these careful preparations and warnings, the Bodhisattva led his caravan into the desert.
When they arrived at the midpoint, the very same chief Yaka who had deceived the first caravan appeared before them, employing the exact same elaborate illusion. The noble lord, the wet clothes, the lotuses, and the armed retinue.
However, the Bodhisattva was not so easily fooled. His keen observation and inherent wisdom made him immediately suspicious. He noticed several subtle but crucial details that had entirely escaped the foolish merchant's attention. The Yaka's eyes were an unnatural, fiery red. The being, despite the bright desert sun, cast no shadow, a classic indicator of a non-human entity in many folk traditions. The Yaka's demeanor was overly bold and fearless.
And most importantly, The Bodhisattva's logical mind recognized the inherent contradiction in the claim of abundant water and constant rain in a region notoriously known as the waterless desert.
Based on these observations, the Bodhisattva swiftly and correctly concluded the true nature of the encounter. He must be a yaka, he reasoned to himself. He must have eaten the first merchant and his caravan. Rather than engaging in polite conversation, the Bodhisattva directly and forcefully confronted the disguised demon, shouting at him to depart. He firmly stated that they were seasoned men of business who would not be foolish enough to discard their vital water supply until they had unequivocally found and secured a new, reliable source. The Yaka chief, realizing his deception had failed, promptly vanished.
This highlights the critical role of mindfulness and acute observation in penetrating deceptive appearances to discern underlying truth. These are not signs that would be apparent to a mind that is distracted or predisposed to gullibility. They demand heightened alertness and critical inquiry.
After the Yaka had departed, some of the Bodhisattva's own men, swayed by the Yaka's convincing appearance, began to harbor doubts. They approached the Bodhisattva suggesting they discard some water to lighten the carts.
The wise merchant, understanding their apprehension, halted the caravan and patiently addressed their concerns with logic and reason. He systematically dismantled the illusion with rational inquiries, asking if they'd ever heard of a lake in the desert, if they felt damp wind, or saw a rain cloud. They confirmed no such signs.
Having clarified the situation, the Bodhisattva declared firmly, "Those fellows were not men, they were demons. They must have come out to make us throw away the water. Then when we were faint and weak, they might have put an end to us. Go on at once and don't throw away a single half-pint of water." He reiterated his suspicion that these beings had likely intended to make them vulnerable, just as they had probably done to the first ill-fated caravan.
Heeding their leader's wise counsel, the caravan pressed onward. Before nightfall, their grim expectations were confirmed. They came upon the 500 carts belonging to the foolish merchant's caravan, still fully laden with their valuable goods. Strewn all around were the skeletal remains of the unfortunate men and their oxen, a chilling testament to the Yaka's brutality and the first merchant's folly.
The wise merchant immediately ordered his men to unyoke their oxen and arrange their own carts into a defensive circular laager. He ensured the men and oxen were well fed and watered. Throughout the night he, along with his most trusted foreman, stood guard. The Yakas, sensing the preparedness and resolute defense of this second caravan, did not dare to launch an attack.
The following morning, the Bodhisattva made further practical arrangements. He had his men replace any of their own weaker or worn-out carts with stronger ones from the abandoned caravan. Furthermore, they judiciously exchanged some of their own more common merchandise for the costlier and more valuable goods that had been left untouched.
With their caravan augmented and their goods upgraded, the Bodhisattva and his men completed the remainder of their journey safely and successfully. They reached their intended destination, sold their wares at a very favorable profit, reportedly 2 or 3 times their original value, and returned home without the loss of a single man or beast.
And now the crucial part, the samodana, or connection, where the Buddha reveals how these ancient characters relate to those in his present time.
He disclosed the following. The foolish young merchant from the past story was identified as Devadatta in the present time. Devadatta, as many know, was the Buddha's own cousin, and a prominent, recurring antagonist, notorious for his malevolence and his repeated attempts to harm the Buddha and create schisms within the Sangha. The retinue and followers of the foolish merchant were identified as the contemporary followers of Devadatta. The wise merchant, the hero of the past story, the Bodhisattva, was none other than the Buddha himself in that former life, and the retinue and followers of the wise merchant were identified as the present-day followers of the Buddha, encompassing both the monastic members of the Sangha and his lay disciples. Finally, the Yaka, demon/goblin, as explicitly suggested by sources, can be viewed as a metaphor for false views, temptation, and doubt.
This identification is of paramount significance. It transforms the ancient narrative from a mere historical anecdote into a direct and poignant commentary on the contemporary figures and complex dynamics unfolding within the Buddha's own community. It throws into sharp relief the long-standing karmic relationship and the starkly contrasting evolutionary paths of the Buddha and his adversary, Devadatta.
The consistent identification of the foolish merchant archetype with Devadatta across numerous lifetimes establishes Devadatta not just as a personal enemy, but as an archetypal representation of the spiritual fool. This is the individual who, despite repeated opportunities, consistently chooses harmful and unskillful paths due to deep-seated ignorance, avijja, pride, mana, and greed, lobha. Devadatta, in this context, transcends his historical persona to become a potent symbol of both the internal defilements and external forces that actively obstruct the spiritual path, embodying the unskillful or akusala mind.
The Samodana element thus transforms the Jataka tales into fragments of an extended karmic biography, demonstrating the long and arduous process of spiritual development for the bodhisattva, alongside the persistent and recurring nature of certain karmic tendencies in figures like Devadatta. It vividly illustrates the principles of cause and effect, karma, as they play out over vast cosmic and personal timescales.
So, what can we take away from this profound story? The Buddha concluded by powerfully reiterating the central moral of the tale. He emphasized that just as in the ancient story, those individuals who foolishly mistook what was no true refuge for a genuine one, much like the foolish merchant heeding the deceptive words of the Yaka, and directly analogous to Anathapindika's friends who had reverted to the teachings of heretical teachers, were destined to meet with destruction or severe spiritual peril.
Conversely, those who steadfastly clung to the truth, exercised wisdom and discernment, as exemplified by the bodhisattva in the past, and by those in the present who maintained unwavering faith in the Triple Gem, successfully escaped danger, achieved their righteous goals, and ultimately found enduring safety, prosperity, and spiritual well-being. The Buddha articulated this principle with profound implications. Clinging to the truth not only endows happiness even up to rebirth in the realm of Brahma, but also leads ultimately to arahantship. Following untruth entails rebirth either in the four states of punishment or in the lowest conditions of mankind.
The impact of this comprehensive teaching, which skillfully combined the immediate discourse on true refuge, the allegorical power of the Jataka narrative, and the direct exposition of core Dharma principles, was transformative. As a direct result, the 500 friends of Anathapindika, who had previously faltered, attained the fruit of the first path to Nibbana, known as Sotapaddi. This means they became stream enterers, individuals who had gained an irreversible glimpse of Nibbana and were now firmly established on the path to full enlightenment.
This remarkable outcome serves as a testament to the extraordinary skill and profound compassion inherent in the Buddha's method of teaching, which masterfully employed narrative, analogy, and direct instruction to guide sentient beings towards ultimate freedom from suffering.
So let's recap some key lessons and consider their relevance for navigating our own lives today. Discernment and prudence. The Jataka powerfully underscores the indispensable value of critical thinking, meticulous observation, like the Bodhisattva, noticing the Yaka's red eyes and lack of shadow, and the profound importance of not being swayed by superficial appearances or persuasive yet baseless claims. Prudence, especially in the management of essential resources, is vital for successfully traversing life's challenging deserts. In our modern world, where we are bombarded with information and opinions, cultivating discernment is more crucial than ever. True versus false refuge. The story serves as a powerful illustration of the far-reaching consequences that stem from the choice of one's spiritual path and guides. The Triple Gem is implicitly and explicitly presented as the sole, truly reliable refuge. This contrasts sharply with adherence to heretical teachers or succumbing to deceptive yakas, whether these are understood as external misleading influences or, more profoundly, internal defilements like doubt and delusion. We must ask ourselves, what are the true, reliable sources of wisdom and guidance in our lives?
And importantly, foresight versus short-sightedness. A stark contrast is drawn between the foolish merchant's narrow focus on immediate, often selfish, gratification and the bodhisattva's encompassing long-term planning, which prioritized the safety and welfare of his entire group. This highlights the superiority of wisdom that considers future consequences over impulsive, short-sighted actions. In our fast-paced society, this lesson is invaluable. Are we making decisions based on immediate gratification or long-term well-being for ourselves and others? Consequences of actions, karma. The dramatically different outcomes for the two caravans provide a clear and compelling illustration of the Buddhist principle of karma. Wise, skillful, and ethical actions, as performed by the bodhisattva, naturally lead to positive results, including safety, prosperity, and spiritual advancement. Conversely, foolish, unskillful, and ill-considered actions, as demonstrated by the foolish merchant, inevitably culminate in negative consequences, such as destruction, suffering, and loss. This isn't just about external events. It's about how our choices shape our inner world.
The waterless desert and the malevolent Jataka are potent and enduring metaphors. They symbolize the myriad challenges, inherent dangers, pervasive illusions, and misleading influences that individuals invariably encounter throughout their journey in samsara, the cycle of worldly existence. The Apaṇṇaka Jataka, therefore, functions as a timeless guide for navigating these multifarious wildernesses.
It actively encourages introspection, prompting reflection on crucial questions. What are our personal yakas? The doubts, delusions, harmful habits, or negative influences that threaten to lead us astray? How can we, in our own lives, cultivate the Bodhisattva's exemplary clear-sightedness, prudence, and resilience? The profound and enduring value of this Jataka is underscored by a traditional belief that it will be among the last to be forgotten when the Dharma disappears from the world.
In the very title of the Jataka, Apaṇṇaka, meaning assured truth or unquestionable, carries a significant implication. It suggests that while the wilderness of life is indeed fraught with uncertainty, deception, and peril, there nevertheless exists a path defined by wisdom and ethical conduct that offers a reliable, unquestionable means to achieve safety, well-being, and ultimate liberation. The Buddha, by narrating this story, implicitly presents his teachings, the Dharma, as this very Apaṇṇaka path.
Furthermore, while the narrative primarily focuses on the contrasting choices and fates of the two merchant leaders, it also powerfully demonstrates how a leader's wisdom or folly directly and significantly impacts the entire community under their charge. The foolish merchant's single disastrous decision led to the tragic demise of his entire retinue. Conversely, the wise merchant's prudent decisions ensured the safety, survival, and eventual prosperity of his entire caravan. This underscores the profound social responsibility that accompanies knowledge, influence, and positions of leadership.
The cultivation of wisdom, therefore, is not merely a pursuit for personal benefit. It is also a vital contribution to the collective well-being and harmony of the larger community. This resonates deeply with the Bodhisattva ideal, which emphasizes working tirelessly for the benefit and enlightenment of all sentient beings. The Apaṇṇaka Jataka, in its elegant simplicity, thus continues to teach that the path of wisdom is not only the path to individual salvation, but also the foundation for a just and thriving society.
A powerful message that truly transcends time. Thank you for joining us on Buddha's Path to Freedom.
We hope this deep dive into the Apaṇṇaka Jataka has provided you with valuable insights for your own journey. Until next time, may you cultivate wisdom and walk the unquestionable path.